Hi, and welcome. My name is Dr. Chris Montanaro. I'm a chiropractor, and I've got two specialties. One's in applied kinesiology, the other is in nutrition. And today we're going to be talking about the top 10 trends in diet and nutrition leading us towards extinction. A lot of great information. Actually, some of this is a collection of some of the best doctors around the world when it comes to diet and nutrition. And we'll have a lot of fun. There'll be some great insights and some things that'll absolutely help you change your life around, help you become as healthy as you possibly can be. So we'll go ahead and we'll jump in and we'll get started. To start out now, one of my biggest frustrations in healthcare has to do when we start covering up a lot of symptoms that patients are having. It's kind of like having a check engine light come up on your car and you put a piece of duct tape over it. Now, because you can't see it, you don't necessarily know that there's a problem, that we think that everything's all fixed. And that's not really necessarily the case unless we're actually really focused on fixing the actual problems that are there. So, that's one major thing that we need to look at. And we're also led to believe that eating a normal diet delivers us health. And unfortunately, what we consider to be a normal diet now in America is a far cry from a diet that's actually going to be something that's healthy, that's going to allow us to be as vitalistic and have as much energy as we would be wanting to have. Things that we want to be able to do, the energy that we want to have just isn't there for a lot of people. The way that we're able to fend off disease and not have to deal with most of the health-related concerns that people have these days. I even myself, quite a long time ago, didn't realize that Americans were some of the sickest people in the entire world when it came to their health. I didn't realize, I was a big athlete. I played basketball in college. We went on to the Sweet 16. I compete in Ironman competitions now, and for the longest time, I didn't really realize just how much my diet was affecting my athletic capabilities. It certainly makes a lot of sense now, but as you're growing up and pretty much eating whatever you want, and it didn't affect your weight, didn't think that it was really affecting you as far as an athletic career was going, but just really finding out how much it was very eye-opening. I didn't realize that most of the disease in this country was directly linked to specific nutritional deficiencies a lot of times. And most of the things people die from these days, whether it's heart disease or cancer, diabetes, every single one of those things can be avoided largely from what's happening with our diet and exercise. So we'll be talking about some of those and certainly there's an incredible amount of information out there, and it's hard to pick your way through it as far as what's the right diet, what should I be eating, what shouldn't I be eating, what supplements are out there, why is something a whole lot better than another, and we'll be touching on all of those different things in a very in-depth way, hopefully a very fun way, so that you can make a whole lot better decisions for yourself when it comes time to do those things. So we'll definitely be looking at that. So as we're moving along here, I definitely understand where a lot of people are coming from when we talk about diet. Usually, I get a lot of patients that come in the office and we're talking about, weight loss and trying to have the most amount of energy that they can and all sorts of different disease processes going on with patients that come in. And I understand, especially when we're talking about their diet and making changes. A lot of times they think that, oh, wow, how am I ever going to be able to make changes like that? It's such a far cry from where they are right now to where I want them to be. And I let them know, look, I understand where you're coming from. I was an athlete. I pretty much ate whatever I wanted. I love ice cream, and I'd probably be just as happy dying with a big carton of ice cream in my lap. Pretty much when I was playing in college even, we'd go away on long road trips, and after the game, every one of us got our own pizza to drive home with when we're riding on the bus. I'm Italian with the best of them. I love my pasta. I love the pizza. And it's one of those things that you don't realize just how much it's affecting you until you actually stop eating a lot of those things, the things that are very refined and processed, things that don't have much nutritional value. And we'll get into some depth as to what it's actually doing for you. And everybody knows that you compare broccoli to a donut, that broccoli is really good for you. But, I'm healthy, so does it really seem to matter what kind of foods that you're putting in when you seem to be at a relatively high level, whether it's athletically or just you think that you've got a decent amount of energy, but when you stop eating a lot of the junk and your energy goes up tenfold, it's actually pretty a neat situation that takes place that most people don't really know what that's like until they make those kind of changes. So moving on, one of the pioneers when it comes to whole food nutrition that I follow very closely, he's the founder of the oldest whole food nutritional company in the entire world. His name was Dr. Roy Ali. And one of the things that he had stated back in 1951 is one of the biggest tragedies of human civilization is the precedence of chemical therapy over nutrition. It's a substitution of artificial therapy over natural, of poisons over food, in which we are feeding people poison and trying to correct the reactions of starvation. One of the biggest mistakes medical science has ever done is to provide drugs to people who are starving. And we're going to show exactly those scenarios as we're moving on today, going throughout the rest of this lecture here. So, what should we be eating? When we look at the building blocks of life, and we need to understand what our body is made of, and understand that in 3 months, every single blood cell in our body is brand new, between 3 and 4 months. We've got every single 7-year period, every single cell in our entire body is brand new. Okay, so think about that for just a second. We could have a scenario where your blood, let's say we'll use on average about 120 days, so about 4 months. And, if that's going to be reproduced over and over again every 120 days, and all you're eating is ho-hos and cupcakes and ding-dongs and ice cream and cereals and pastas and pizza, then we're rebuilding our red blood cells with junk, essentially. And, every 7 years, we're rebuilding ourselves more devitalized. We're not having the amount of energy and vitality that we're looking to have. So, or we could have a scenario where every single 4-month period, all of our blood is brand new and we're having a lot more energy. We're able to hold oxygen better with our red blood cells. Every 7 years, we're getting healthier and healthier. And that's not really what's taking place in this country at all. We are, on average, breaking down. We're getting more and more tired, more degeneration taking place. Our bodies are breaking down at rates that we've really never seen before. So, it's something that's going to be very important to take a look at. Also, what we're eating, some average statistics here. Today, the average American eats roughly 200 pounds of sugar per person per year. And whether that sounds astronomical or not, back in the 1980s, people ate an average of about 12 pounds of sugar per person per year. We're not going to be able to get into the full 100 hours that I normally do when I'm teaching doctors several different courses in nutrition. But sometimes patients will ask when I'm talking about taking their carbohydrate levels, their sugar levels, and bringing them down and even cutting them in half. They're like, "Oh, doc, is that really healthy to do? I've read this, I've read that. What should I do?" It's like, you don't understand. You're at an average of 200 pounds per year. Even if we go down to 100 pounds by cutting things in half, you're nowhere as close to where we've been through almost all of human history. And I think that's a little bit more closely associated with where we want to be able to get to truly be as healthy as that we can be. It wasn't until we started seeing these massive spikes in the amount of carbohydrate and sugars that are coming into our body that the cancers, the heart disease, the diabetes, and all the degenerative things that go on these days that we have to deal with, that's when they started making those big spikes. We also see people eat upwards of between around 55 pounds of fats and oils, more than 300 cans of soft drinks, 50 pounds of cupcakes and cookies, and 20 gallons of ice cream every single year. And we wonder why cancer and heart disease and diabetes are on the rise. It's largely due to what we're eating, and we'll show that as we keep going on throughout the day. So, why is this important? Well, about 100 years ago, heart attacks were practically unheard of in the United States. But people 100 years ago also ate fresh whole foods. Now, eating may have been an issue. You may have been so poor that you didn't get enough to eat. But if you did eat, we're talking about eating unprocessed, unrefined foods, things that are natural, they're organic. We didn't have all the pesticides and fertilizers and different things that they use that adulterate the foods that we're getting in. It's estimated roughly that you need about 80 cups of spinach grown in today's soil as you would to reach the nutrient values of 1 cup of spinach about 100 years ago. That just kind of gives you the idea. Nobody sits around and they're going to eat 80 cups of spinach, in a sitting. That's just not going to happen. It's not realistic. But when people say, yeah, I eat a pretty good diet, I get what I need, it's not even close. Because of, well, we're going to show just how depleted some of our soils are these days, that eating even organic foods and a lot of it doesn't necessarily give you all of the nutrition our body needs to be functioning at its best. So kind of to drive this point home just a little bit more, these are just kind of a graph to show us the decreases of iron, just iron in spinach. And when we look back in 1940, we had about an average of 158 milligrams of iron that was in spinach. You drop down to about 27 milligrams in 1965, and today we're down to about 2.2 milligrams. Okay, you can eat pounds of spinach every single day, and it won't supply the iron enzymes that you need to stay healthy. It's just not going to happen, and that's just an example of one mineral, one nutrient that we need to be getting into our bodies, and it's just decreasing significantly, going from that 158 milligrams down to 2.2 today. And certainly getting worse with the soils that we have. So moving on, we've got a lot of different problems with our health and our food these days. Most of our food today is certainly very processed and stripped of all of its nutritional value. And why would that be? You have to understand it's not first and foremost something where they're just trying to make us sick from the foods that we eat. There's purposes behind it, kind of. One is, we have a scenario where in this country we are shipping foods over long distances, and grocery stores need to be able to keep food on the shelves. And if food rots incredibly quickly, then they're losing money. They can't sell food fast enough to warrant putting it on the shelves in the first place. They'd go out of business. So we need to strip out a lot of what would be good, all of the nutritional value. And now all of a sudden food can sit on a shelf a whole lot longer. And you get to the point where bacteria won't even eat it because there's nothing of nutritional value there. So that will play a large role as to why we're processing and refining food so much. Also, if you ever had the luxury of having a real unprocessed, unrefined loaf of whole wheat bread, sucker weighs like 10 pounds per slice just to get bread that's going to be like that. And now we process and refine our food so much that the bread weighs next to nothing. You could squish it down into this little ball very easily, and it's incredibly light, which is important because we have to ship so much of our food across the country these days. Shipping is expensive, and it's all based on weight. So we want food to last longer on the shelves, and we want to be able to ship it cheaper and cheaper. So we understand why they're doing that, but it comes at a huge expense of not getting the nutrition that we need with what we're going to be getting there. So as we're looking at it, our soils, let's just even take an argument for a second that our soils are completely healthy. They're really not, but let's say that they are healthy for a minute. We'll make that argument. That's coming up in a little bit. But even if they are completely healthy soils, that everything is grown organically, sometimes, especially here in the Northeast where my practice is, we're shipping food, especially produce, over thousands of miles sometimes, and you've got to pick foods earlier. Sometimes weeks, maybe even months earlier. And think about all the nutrition, even in good soils, that they're not getting in to the actual fruits and vegetables because we're picking it so early. That's just not coming up from the ground into our foods. So, that's one major piece of where that's an issue. But our soils are incredibly unhealthy, and we're going to be talking about that now. Unhealthy soil will yield unhealthy plants. It just kind of makes sense. And humans who subsist on Plants grown in unhealthy soils will themselves grow weak. Soils can become depleted by bad farming techniques, including growing the same crops on the same land year after year after year. We're not rotating our crops anymore. We're not growing brush cover and tilling it into the soil and allowing it. Soil is a living thing. It's got living insects in there. There's nutrients in there that need to get replenished on a regular basis. And because we're just pumping out thousands and thousands, millions of pounds worth of food on the same soil, that it's becoming depleted. It's getting sick, and that's where we're having a lot of our problem. We're misusing the use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides that not only kill the bad things, but it's killing a lot of the good stuff that's in there as well. A lot of the life form that's in there that make it alive and create some of that decayed matter that ends up in brought in or inorganic nutrients and brought it in, converted by the plants, becoming organic nutrients, something that's utilizable by the human body. And that's sometimes the difference between, you may even see supplements that are out on the market where they'll say colloidal this and colloidal that. And a lot of that comes down to minerals that are mined from a mine, literally. And it's completely unnatural. Nobody ever mined some rock from a mine and just started sucking on the rock. We never got nutrition that way. Those are inorganic nutrients. But what we need to have happen is the plants will break that down, utilize it, turn it into something organic that our bodies can actually use. And that's largely what we want to be able to see happen. So our topsoil, long-term deprivation of but a microscopic quantity of but one essential nutrient in our diet alters the precise and vital balance of the body's chemicals. Ultimately, this results in symptoms that are the precursors to chronic and fatal diseases. And while farmers in centuries past were forced to let dead fields lie fallow until the combined efforts of wildlife and rotting plants return their fertility, modern farming technology allows us to ignore symptoms of soil exhaustion. We can actually force things to grow in soils that would never be able to produce food because we literally force it with chemicals, and that's not necessarily a healthy thing to do. Today's high-tech farming continues to douse the land with antibiotic, toxic chemicals that force green plants to grow against the will of a sickened Mother Earth, and that's what's leading us a lot to having the types of problems that we are today. Now, take something like Ethiopia. Most of us kind of think of Ethiopia, one, the incredible runners that they end up having, but two, we kind of picture Ethiopia as this area where there's just, it's desolate wasteland and people, this massive famine that's taking place. And, that's not how it was quite a while ago. One of the main reasons that the famine in East Africa today is because of a lack of topsoil brought about by the massive deforestation. At the turn of the century, 90% of Ethiopia's land was covered by dense, thick rainforest. And less than a century later, not 5% of that forest remains. And that's part of where the problem comes from. We had all of this forest with these deep roots that would pull up the water basin, and it was lush, thick rainforest, and people flourished. And because of a quick dollar, when companies would come in and they just wipe out all the vegetation, you lose those roots that are bringing up the water basin, and you've got massive amounts of people not being able to eat to where they were. And that's, you see all those pictures on TV, the video footage of people literally just wasting away, and that's is a result of not bringing up the water and having the vegetation and actually having live topsoil to be able to grow things in. With the trees cut down for easy profit, rainwater, instead of soaking into the soil, rushed down the hillsides, flooded valleys, and carried away a lot of the earth that was going to be of value for growing things in the first place. The trees that had shaded the topsoil and the roots had acted like pumps, drawing water near to the surface on the ground, keeping the water table as high as it could be so that we can get all of the nutrients and the plants growing the way that we wanted to. And without those roots, to keep that water table high, like we had said, the soil was exposed to the sun, wind, and rain. It was baked dry, and it was washed away into streams, rivers, and oceans, and it was just simply blown away. And without the soil with which to grow our plants and feed the animals, humans We had massive amounts of starvation that took place. And, unfortunately, there's signs of a lot of that happening in our country as well, here in America. Right now in Iowa, topsoil that was once a foot deep today are less than 6 inches deep, which may not sound like a lot, but that's already cut in half. Okay? In the United States, the Department of Agriculture estimates that a 6-inch loss of topsoil, such as the current one in the southern Piedmont, is capable of reducing crop yields by 40% per year. All right? That's starting to look like a pretty massive number where we're going to have a lot of issues taking place with our health. Geologists say that there are some 58 million square miles of land surface on the earth, but only about 10 million square miles on this can actually be farmed. And it takes about 2 acres of land to feed one person per year. And right now there's only enough for 1 acre per person per year. And not all of that is good land. Yeah, all right, so you kind of get an idea of where that's coming, about, and that's why we have such scenario where 2/3 of the world is going to bed hungry every single night. The U.S. topsoil, more than half of the agricultural land in the United States has been severely eroded by farming incorrectly. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, our current 421 million acres of productive farmlands, 97 million acres are eroding at more than twice the tolerance level, the level at which soil can be replaced naturally. Another 89 million acres are eroding at 1 to 2 times the tolerance level. In all, 40% of our farmlands are losing topsoil. So now we have another one of the pioneers in whole food nutrition, and his name was Dr. Francis Pottenger. And he's well known for his cat studies, and he's actually got a book that's called Pottenger's Cats. He's a research scientist who worked with laboratory cats performing operations to remove their adrenal glands. Cats will die without their adrenal glands, so product manufacturers at the time used cats to calibrate the strength of their adrenal extracts to determine how much of the product was needed to keep the cats alive. Dr. Pottenger fed his cats a diet of raw milk, cod liver oil, and cooked meat scraps, which was considered the optimal diet at that point in time. However, he was concerned that by the cat's poor post-operative survival rates and by health issues he started noticing in the offspring. Okay. At one point, Dr. Pottenger began ordering raw meat scraps from a local meat packing plant as a means of feeding his large cat population. It just ended up, people found out about him having these cat studies, and he ended up with hundreds of cats on his door, and he couldn't possibly have all cooked meat scraps, so he started getting these raw meat scraps. He decided to separate the group of cats that were fed the raw meat scraps instead of the cooked meat scraps, and to see if it had any effect on their health and vitality, and it really did. And intrigued by the initial results, Dr. Pottenger then devised a series of controlled experiments along with Dr. Alvin Ford, professor of pathology at the University of Southern California. So here's some of the things that they had found. They had the 1st through the 4th generations from the raw food diet. And this is what they had found. The control group cats fed raw food diet remained healthy and gave birth to healthy kittens with each succeeding generation. Each generation grew up to be of uniform size and development with normal fur, tissues, and skeletal structure. Calcium and phosphorus levels in their bones were normal. Their organs and nervous system functioned normally, and their coordination was perfect. They were very resistant to infections. Their mental state was stable and friendly, and you could play with them. There were no birth complications, and nursing was normal. The cats gave birth to an average of 5 kittens, each weighing roughly about 119 grams. Now we have the cooked food diet in the 1st generation. The cooked food diet cats gave birth to healthy appearing offspring in the 1st generation. However, they developed diseases and illnesses near the end of their lives. These diseased conditions developed midlife in the 2nd generation of offspring. The 3rd generation began manifesting unhealthy conditions in the beginning of their lives, and many died before 6 months of age. the following conditions were noted in these cats. And we'll get into that in just a second on the next slide. But what's important to understand too is in the second generation with the cooked food diet, they actually diagnosed the first case of asthma in a cat ever. Okay. So this slide is just a little bit harder to see, but what they had was poor eyesight started developing. They had nearsightedness or farsightedness, heart problems, thyroid and bladder problems, nervous system problems, meningitis and paralysis, infections of various organs, ovary and testicle problems, liver problems, inflammation issues, uterine congestion, atrophy of various organs. They became very lethargic, started developing all sorts of different degenerative type disorders. They started becoming very osteoporotic. And one of the things that really was the most intriguing as far as from a scientific standpoint and the most scary was that they were never able to get to fourth generation. Third generation cats almost lost all of their libido if they could get them to mate, which was a huge issue. Every single one of them were stillbirths. They miscarried and they never had a live birth. They could never get to fourth generation. Now, think about that for a second. Now, I'm in my early 30s, so people in and around my generation, a little bit earlier, a little bit older, think about the fact that we're kind of third generation-ish since we've been strongly processing and refining our foods. Okay? Think about the people in and about my age that are having problems with infertility and libido issues and miscarriages, and that number is actually just going higher and higher and higher. Now, we saw these studies back in the 30s and 40s with cats where they couldn't get past fourth generation, and we're actually seeing the effects of that taking place again in the human population because we're having such a hard time with infertility and miscarriages and things of that nature. There's a direct correlation there to the kind of foods that we're getting and how healthy we really are. Those cats were passing on nutritional deficiencies from generation to generation, and we're doing that as well in our human generations from generation to generation. Kids are getting sicker. There's more disease processes where instead of earning the diagnosis of diabetes by the time people are in their 40s and 50s and 60s, kids are getting it, in 20 years old and in their teens, and there's even type 2 diabetes that are being developed, and they earn that diagnosis, even less than 10 years old. Okay, so it's the same exact thing happening. It's a pattern that's being unfolded from nutritional deficiencies being passed on. All right, these aren't just diseases that pop up and, oh, you know what, it's really unlucky or it's genetic and I can't do anything about it anyway. It has nothing to do with that. Maybe very, very slightly. Really when it comes down to it, only 5% of our health afflictions have anything to really do with our DNA. When it comes down to genetic things, the rest of it ultimately is how we take care of ourselves. It's the food, it's the diet and exercise, and the mental capacity that we have. And we're going to talk about that in depth in a little bit. So as we're moving on, it's just really important to keep in mind those types of things. And kind of where the title came from for this particular lecture had to do with the amount of sperm that are being decreased in production as well. We take a look at sperm counts today compared to back in 1929. The average, there was about 100 million sperm per milliliter in the sperm in 1929. And you move up to 1990, that number jumped down to 66 million sperm per milliliter. And today, we're down to about 5 million sperm per milliliter. Now, 5 million sperm per milliliter, 5 million. It sounds like a lot. It's a big number. But you have to understand that when a man is diagnosed as infertile, you're given that diagnosis when you're at a level of 10,000 sperm per milliliter or less. Okay? So, one thing that's also interesting is this isn't just humans that are having this problem. This is all mammals across the world are seeing these decreases. Okay? If we see these massive decreases in sperm counts, and you see the similar effects of the Pottenger cat studies with nutritional deficiencies being passed on, and more infertility because of sperm counts, because of all of the different things that are affecting the hormones, and increases in miscarriages and all of these problems. There's only one direction that we're going right now, and it's not a good direction. We're not getting healthier. We're not getting more vitalistic. We're not fighting disease better. We're dying at a much faster rate from heart disease and cancer and diabetes and degenerative chronic disorders. And it doesn't have to be that way, but it's very much being sped up and going in that direction. And it's not because we have a deficiency in cholesterol medication or depression medication or acid reflux medication. It's just one of those things that, it's just a major issue that we're breaking down, and we're not getting healthier and healthier. We're spending more money than ever before on all of these drugs and all these healthcare, programs, and we could spend another $100 trillion on new drugs and on our healthcare system, and it's not going to fix a thing until we start actually improving our health. Because, again, we don't have nutritional deficiencies or we don't have drug deficiencies. We've got these nutritional deficiencies that are taking place. Okay? Well, largely what this all means is that processed foods it equals degeneration. Everything breaks down, and they were seeing that in the cat studies. They found that you could, after the cats had died, they would do autopsies, and they would break down the bone, and they could see the mineral content, and they would see that the sutures that normally would close shut, that they didn't even close shut anymore, and they saw massive changes in the skeletal structure, and bones became paper thin because they didn't have the mineral content anymore. They were very, very sick animals. And they're just degenerating. And we see it in our older population right now. They're all, not all, but many of them, they've got their canes, they're in their wheelchairs at 80 and 85 years old, and there's no reason people should have to do that. There are societies where there's 95 and 100-year-olds, crouched down in a squatted position, picking from gardens and carrying things and walking long distances and look just as healthy as people who are 30 and 40 years old. That's what should be the normal, and it can happen. Okay, we don't have to be in a nursing home and requiring canes and wheelchairs and all those things that you picture sometimes that an elderly person is having to go through. Nobody wants to go through that, and we don't have to be having these bodies that have degenerated so much and become so sickly that we have to go through that. Okay. So we have this mentality these days that more is better. Okay. Well, I'm going to, a few potato chips, I'm going to have a whole bag. That must be better. Or, any number of things that we think that we need a whole lot more of. It's just not true. And what we should be doing is increasing the quality. You could take this analogy just about anywhere. You take a TV that you bought for $20, and it was $20, and it went bad 6 months later. It's like, oh, now you got to buy another TV. You spend another $20, and over the course of your life, you've bought 1,000 TVs. And none of them lasted worth anything, and they were, just miserable to deal with. You're constantly dealing with frustration. Same thing happens with our food. If we spend a little extra money on our food, you're going to end up having a whole lot better health and vitality and energy as a result of it. Sometimes people end up buying food that appears cheaper as far as the sticker that's on there when they check out, and they pay less dollars. But in the long run, when you add in the decrease in energy, vitality, and health that they have, when you add in the doctor's bills that'll be coming, because they surely will, getting sick many more times a year, out of work because they're sick more often or getting hurt more easily, that all comes into play there. And ultimately you'll save way more money if you keep yourself, well fed and you keep yourself healthy to begin with. Okay. So now we move on to just talking about cholesterol briefly, because this is a very much a nutritional issue, and something that we need to talk about here, because there's a lot of myths and misunderstandings when it comes to cholesterol. Now, where does the problems with cholesterol and where it all got started was, we've got Western medicine, and they've got their cadaver, and they cut open the cadaver, and you open an artery, and oh man, there's cholesterol there. Look, it's narrowing the arteries, and oh, it's a really bad thing because it's decreasing blood flow and it's causing heart attacks. And all of a sudden, cholesterol is this really bad thing. And we never really took a look at, well, let's just, for instance, think that the body was smart and knew what it's doing. A lot of, and most holistic practitioners realize that the body is pretty smart and pretty much knows what it's doing and does what it does for a reason. So let's go under that premise for a minute. Why would the body start putting cholesterol plaquing in the arteries? Well, there's a few different reasons. One is when you eat diets that are very high in refined and processed carbohydrate, one, it's very inflammatory and destructive to the lining of arteries. And two, it produces tons of insulin, which is one of the most destructive, degenerative hormones that our body makes. We don't want tons of insulin flowing around our body, and we won't if we don't eat tons of sugar. So now we've got a combination of incredible amounts of carbohydrate, incredible amounts of insulin, literally being very destructive to the lining of our arteries. And it keeps eroding the artery walls and eroding it to the point of it could literally, you could bleed to death as a result. And your body's smart enough to realize that. So you create some erosion, almost like raking the lining of the artery walls. And now the body's smart enough and says, well, all right, let me take some plaque. Let me put some cholesterol, kind of like plaster, and plaster the lining of the arteries so that you don't bleed to death. And, your body's always going to try to keep you alive as long as possible. So your body is hoping, all right, well, let me plaster it a little bit. Hopefully you won't do this again to me, eating all this sugar and getting all this insulin flowing around. And the next meal you eat is the same thing. And it's a constant. Every meal for every day of your life, for months and years and decades, you're doing this exact same process, building, shredding and more plaquing and shredding and more plaquing. And now your arteries are getting narrower and narrower and narrower. Okay? Cholesterol is not the problem. It's the fix of what the real problem is. What you've been doing for weeks and months and years of your life is just eating a diet that's just miserably horrible for yourself. Okay? So, Western medicine says, here, we want you to, take all of these cholesterol statin lowering medications, which is just, it's going to do a lot of major problems. I've got other lectures that gets into heart disease and cholesterol, but it's just, this is to drive home the point that you don't have a statin medication deficiency in the body, that it's largely a problem with the body adapting to and dealing with a situation that is less than optimal to try to keep you alive as long as possible. And it can keep you alive like that for decades. But at some point, the arteries will close if you don't change what you're doing to cause it in the first place. Okay? So very important to understand there. So, just some little bit of background about some things on cholesterol. It's not a dangerous thing. Cholesterol is incredibly important for you. Cholesterol makes up every hormone in your entire body. If you remember back to biology class again, every cell in your entire body is made up of a bilipid layer. So we need all of these fats and cholesterol to keep us as healthy as possible. All right. Fat is incredibly good for you. The good fats, our fish oil, our flaxseed oil, things like that, we should be getting plenty of to keep us as healthy as we can. That way we can make good hormones. That way we can lubricate our joints. We can deal with the stresses in our life more effectively and not have these depressions and anxieties that creep up because we can't handle it. Our stress handling hormones can't be made properly. Okay? It all comes into play there. All right? Keep in mind, Our body makes cholesterol everywhere, in our intestines, our adrenals, our liver, our skin. For a body that makes cholesterol purposefully everywhere, thinking that we've got this smart body that knows what it's doing, why would you want to shut that off? And actually, if you stop eating cholesterol and fat, your body will go into overproduction to make even more of it because it really needs it. So why not help it out? Eat some more of what we've always done, eating more of our good fats. All right, there's societies that eat fish practically for lunch and breakfast and dinner and snacks in between. Heart disease is not something that those societies deal with, okay? We need to understand that. And people who say, yeah, I eat fish, once a week, once every couple weeks, that's just not going to cut it. I like fish as well, and I don't eat fish as much as I need to. So supplementing with a really high quality fish oil is going to be incredibly, incredibly important. Stuff that's not going to be adulterized, that's cold pressed, that is coming from the deep parts of the ocean that aren't going to be as contaminated with other things that people worry about sometimes. That we've got good fish, not the fish that they can't even sell in the grocery store, so they put it into a supplement. These are all things really important. And your average supplement that's on the market, even sometimes from what you would think are reputable companies, you end up getting rancid oils and things that are problems. So we want to keep that in mind a little bit when it comes to what we're choosing there, when it comes to our oils. But again, the heart disease, there's other seminars like this that I've done that are on the website that you'll be able to get into much more depth about specifically heart disease and cholesterol. But just kind of as we're talking about nutrition, it ties in here pretty well. So when we're talking about health and nutrition, we want to know, and I ask my patients, every one of them on my intake paperwork, are you healthier right now than you were 5 years ago? So it's either a yes or a no. And so many times like no, I'm not as healthy as I was, and that's why they're here in the office. Are you healthy right now as you would like to be? And almost nobody is truly exactly happy with their health. They always want they always want more energy. They want to be able to run faster, be able to compete longer. They want to, have more health, live longer, all those types of things. And, the next question, do you have a plan to be healthier 5 years from now? Because without a plan in anything in life, it doesn't even have to be in your health, but anything. If you don't have a plan, you're kind of wandering aimlessly and you're really left up to chance. So it's really important to take a look at that. And when it comes to our diets, you could even ask a kindergartner, what's healthier, a donut or an apple? And every single one of them, even kindergartners, knows the difference that a apple is going to be much, much healthier than a donut. So why do we choose to eat the donuts and not eat the apple? And eat all of the processed and refined foods that we eat, out of convenience maybe, but it becomes easy and things that we do on a regular basis. But what we don't do is we don't necessarily understand the ramifications of what eating the donut means. We think of it as, oh yeah, it's just a donut. What's really the big deal? But when we look at what we talked about earlier, the quadrillion mitochondria that need to be pumping out energy, and the amount of nutrition that makes all of that takes place. And now you're going to eat a donut. Well, what does that mean as far as your health and vitality? And not only that, but we don't look at the donut as being chemicals and being very devoid in nutrition. We don't see that a lot of times. Now, if I was to hand you a glass full of a cyanide, you'd be like, yeah, right, yeah, like I'm going to really do that. We don't look at the donut in the same way. But even though it won't kill you instantly like the cyanide will, it will kill you little bits over time. It's literally draining the energy from your body. It's draining your body's life capacity every day of your life for decades. And it is pulling away from your life. It will cause you to die ultimately earlier when you make those choices over and over and over again by choosing the donut and the cereals and the processed and refined foods, everything that's made from flour and sugar and all those types of things. That's exactly what's going to take place. All right. And I've used some of these slides in lectures. I teach doctors all over the country, and you kind of get a giggle sometimes when I talk about this. But you get a scenario where the child's sitting on the couch and eating some potato chips, and the child gives a few potato chips to the dog, and the mom gets really upset. It's like, no, you can't give the potato chips to the dog. Those are dangerous. It'll kill the dog. Those potato chips are for you. It's like, well, does that really make sense? It sounds actually kind of ridiculous when you put it that way. Or child's playing video games. He's like, well, you sit there and you play your video games, and I need to take the dog for its walk. The dog needs to get his walk in every day. He's like, think about that. All right? We've got another mammal, the dog, that needs its exercise and needs better food, and not even giving that to our children. You can eat the potato chips and cereal and ho-hos and cupcakes and ding-dongs and ice cream and pizza and all those different things, and that's okay somehow. But we don't look at it as how dangerous that really truly is. And then when the kid is home from school, with earaches, ear infections, and sick all the time, several times a year, it's like, oh, yeah, well, aren't kids supposed to get sick a couple times a year? It's like, no, you're not supposed. There's not the normal amount of getting sick. That's ridiculous. What you have is a body that is depleted. Its defenses are down. And now bacteria can start doing its thing. Viruses can come out and start lurking around because the immune system isn't there to fight it back. And that's the problem. Right now, every person on the planet has bacteria and viruses in their body right now that, given the right circumstances and a lowered immune system, would kill them. Absolutely no question. There's not anybody that could argue that. But the immune system's up strong enough that it could fight that off, and it's not an issue. But, you get to school starts, September, October, you're getting into school, things get a little bit more stressed. Meetings usually are at their peak that time of year. You get a scenario where, you get into midterms and you got Thanksgiving coming around. So people gorge themselves with all sorts of terrible food. Delicious, but foods that are very devoid in nutrition. And now the holidays are coming around, and Black Friday, and you've been up all night long, and you've got work parties and people making Christmas cookies from right from going from Thanksgiving all the way to Christmas, and all of the shopping and the stress and the family get-togethers, and you're eating like it's Christmas every single day of the year. And now you've gone into New Year's, and you're constantly eating and drinking and doing all these things, literally just beating your bodies up for months. And we even earlier than that, we've had Halloween. Okay, and we've got all the candy and sugar from Halloween leading into Thanksgiving, leading into Christmas. All of these refined and processed foods. I mean, you got to have your apple pies and your breads and your pastas and your all these different things that we love to have during the holidays. And now it's like, okay, well, it's Christmas time, maybe it's winter, and people get sick more often in the winter. It's ridiculous. There's no more bacteria around in the wintertime. What happens is your defenses are down. You've gorged yourself. You're under stress. You've eaten in a way that your immune system's out to lunch. And you're just bacteria, viruses. It's more opportune time. Your defenses are down, and they're going to come out to play. And that's a lot of times what ends up happening. You don't have to get sick more often in the wintertime. That's just not the way it's supposed to be. Okay? What happens is we don't necessarily see all of the foods, those bad foods, as, I'm going to have this piece of bread, this acid reflux bread. We don't call it that. But you eat enough bread, and all of a sudden the body can't digest it very well because there's not any enzymes there naturally in that refined and processed bread. So bread actually starts sitting in the stomach even longer because it can't digest very well. What happens to carbohydrate when it sits in a warm, moist tube for a long period of time. All right. Some people might start thinking about, grapes or grain. All right. Sitting in a tube for long periods of time, it ferments. You make alcohol that way. Well, that fermentation process doesn't just happen in big vats and tubes in a lab or a company that makes beer and wine and alcohol. We have a big, warm, moist tube sitting right there in our stomach. And when we've got carbohydrate that sits in our stomach longer than it's supposed to, it starts fermenting. And those acids start blowing back up. And it starts becoming painful. And now you've got acid reflux. You're eating foods your body doesn't want. It can't digest it very well. So the smart body happens to just start trying to spit it back up. All right? And now we say, oh, well, stupid body, you're not supposed to be feeling pain in your stomach. You're not supposed to be spitting some of that back up. So now we take some acid reflux medications and actually lower all the acid, including the good acids that are supposed to break things down quickly, moving them out of our stomach so they can't blow back up, but it lowers all the acid. And now food sits in there even longer. And that's what I mean about some of these medications that don't come close to fixing the problem. And for anybody who's listening to this that is on an acid reflux medication, when did your doctor tell you that you could come off of the medication? Most times when I ask patients that, they say, well, I guess they just expected me to take this forever. It's like, okay, well, if they expected you to take it forever, is it fixing anything? It obviously can't be. Or at some point down the road, whether it's weeks or months or years, it would have fixed the problem ultimately, and you won't need it anymore. But that's not what's taking place. They're just covering up a bad problem of bad food coming in, and your body can't handle it and can't digest it, and now your body's spitting it back up. So they lower all the enzymes, all of the hydrochloric acid, the good acid that's supposed to be there, and causing all of those problems. Okay, it's really easy to fix if you start eating foods that are loaded with enzymes. Our fruits and our vegetables, and we chew our food really well. And maybe even sometimes using digestive enzymes, or even, God forbid, this really scares people sometimes, take things that increase the hydrochloric acid in the stomach so you can break things down really quickly, move it past the stomach, and now things can't blow back up. And there's nothing to cause pain in the first place. And you've actually fixed the problem. You've sped up digestion. And now because you're breaking things down properly, you're going to the bathroom a whole lot easier, and not every 2 or 3 or 4 days, or sometimes I've even had patients that say that they go to the bathroom every 10 to 14 days. Okay? That's not normal. We're supposed to go to the bathroom with every major meal that we've had. Think about a mountain, okay? And you've got train tracks going through the mountain, and a train goes in, and nothing comes out. And another train goes in. And another train goes in, and now one of them comes out. And another train goes in. Like, well, what's going on there? There's something wrong with that. That doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. You want to know what's going on in there. And the same thing happens with us eating our food. We eat more food and eat food and eat and eat and eat. And now, where is that all going? And that's where you end up with scenarios. I believe it was John Wayne when they had their autopsy, that he had something like 70 pounds of rotting fecal material in his gut when he passed away. It's no wonder that he died of colon cancer. Okay, we need our bodies to be getting rid of all of this food, keeping it moving on a very regular basis. If you're not going to the bathroom at least every day, that needs to be looked at. You need to realize, all right, my digestive system's not working. I need to improve it. And if your gut's not working, then most research would say that 60 to 70% of your immune system is actually in your gut. So not only is your digestive system not working, but your immune system is having issues as well. And that all ties in together, and things that we need to look at. Okay? So we're looking at poison in our body and what we're putting into our bodies. How many people out there could actually go to a lake or a stream within 5 miles of where you live and actually drink the water that's in those lakes and streams? Think about that for a minute. 1,000 years ago, not an issue. Now you actually kind of got to think about it a little bit. You know, that's how could that possibly be a healthy scenario? How could we be as healthy as we could be if our environment is becoming sicker and sicker? You know, there are some areas where fish are just, you know, they're dying. They've got toxic levels of all sorts of chemicals in them. Okay? How can we see that the animals dying in those streams and think that we're healthy? That just doesn't make sense. Would we ever consider drinking water from runoff from our farms grown in our children's food? All right. You know, our food is grown and we're using tons of pesticides and hormones and fertilizers that are chemically forcing crops to grow. And you get the water runoff. Would you drink that water that's growing your food with all that chemicals? All those same chemicals are in the food. And that's what we need to understand is how those chemicals are really affecting us. Okay. What we need to also understand, there's not one drop in the ocean that's not contaminated with PCBs, which is a fire retardant. The whales are so toxic with DDT, and we haven't used that since the 70s, that we fear for their survival. Last year, there was a study that measured the flow of blood from the mother to the fetus, which is supposed to not let bad stuff pass through. And it measured over 200 chemicals in it that aren't supposed to be there. Okay? Very deep. We were just in a society where 100 years ago, we didn't have to deal with all of these different chemicals and things in our bodies. And the prevailing system that we have these days is bad health has to do with either bad luck, which we've kind of talked about, bad germs, or bad genes. And what it comes down to is that it's really bad science when we talk about things like that. We're sick because of the bad choices that we compound with the bad choices that we've got, time in and time out, and it catches up to us. As long as you believe that you're sick because of bad luck, bad germs, and bad genes, then you believe that you've got no control. And that's when people just, it doesn't matter. I'll just eat another donut. I won't exercise today because it doesn't really matter. I'm going to get sick whether I'm going to get sick eating good food or bad food. It doesn't matter. So what I'm here to tell you is that it absolutely matters incredibly, what it is that we put into our food. And we'll talk about this as we're moving on a little bit further here. So right now it's even considered controversial as far as what we eat, whether it's important or not. It's controversial that you're sick because of the fact that you eat Twinkies. And it is true. It's now controversial that people are sick because they don't exercise enough. I can absolutely tell you 100% guaranteed that if you don't exercise, you are absolutely not as healthy as you could be. It's absolutely required to exercise regularly to be as healthy as you could be. And I've got another seminar that's already online that you can watch that talks about training of elite athletes, about exercise from amateur levels all the way up to elite athletes, and getting the most out of your body for the elite athlete, and even just for the amateur person just trying to be as healthy as they could be. So I won't get into athletics a whole lot right at the moment. It's not necessarily our topic here, but we really need to keep that in mind as well. And then, thinking, our state of mind, loving yourself and others, contributing, belonging. Without those types of feelings, that mental capacity, you can't be as healthy as you can be. And that's really the foundation of applied kinesiology as taught by Dr. Goodhart, that we need all of those pieces. We need the physical structural side, which is kind of what chiropractors are really well known for. We need the biochemical nutritional side, which is our diet, our nutrition, maybe if we absolutely had to, using medications that are out there. That's that component of it. And then we've got that mental, emotional, spiritual side of our health. And we need all of those different pieces to really, truly be as healthy as we would like to be. All right. So let's take a look at the differences between two different types of scientists, one being a biologist and the other pathologist. Just out of a guess, even if you don't know, most people will probably get this right. If you were to take a chimpanzee from the wild and you brought them into captivity, would you guess that in captivity that they're healthier or that they're sicker? And almost every time I've asked that question, it's without a doubt they're healthier in the wild. And why is that? Well, you change the way that they move, you change the way that they eat, you change the way that they think, and it strongly affects their health in a very negative way. Okay, so now we do that. We take a chimpanzee, we bring them into captivity, we've changed the way that they eat and the way that they move, and all of a sudden they start developing arthritis or they start becoming sick. And looking at it from the point of view of a biologist, you're going to say, oh, well, what's changed? They were healthy, and now you brought them into captivity. You've changed the way that they've eaten. They're not moving. They're not as agile. They don't have this huge forest to be able to go have fun in. Not running from predators. They're not doing all the, they don't have to hunt down their food. So they're not having to think very clearly. It's like, okay, well, these are the things that are changing. Let's add these things back in or put them back in the wild and they'll get their health back. Okay, important to think about. But you take that same exact scenario from the point of view of a pathologist. The pathologist is going to say, oh, well, look at that. The chimpanzee's blood pressure is up. Let's give them some blood pressure medication. Chimpanzee's cholesterol is up. Let's give them a cholesterol medication. They get sick more often, so let's give them, some other medication. They get, they're stiff and achy. You can tell that they're not moving as well, so you give them some type of pain relief. And, all of those different things, looking at it from two different points of view. One is saying, you know what, let's take them back to when they were healthy, doing all the things that meant when they were healthy. And that's exactly the same scenario in parallel I want you to understand when we talk about human beings. When we were hunter-gatherers, when we were running more often, we were having to go find and hunt our food, working out in fields all day long. We're, eating foods that were, fish, whatever mom or dad were able to go hunt and catch. They cooked it on their own. They had to think more clearly. They had to fend for themselves. We're, healthier bodies. Okay. We didn't have this, diabetes and heart disease and cancers that are developing and all these things that cause degeneration in our bodies. In the same way, when we lived that hunter-gatherer type way, much, much healthier bodies. Yes, back, people are going to make the argument, yeah, but people died from infections. Yes, they did. We still lucky enough that we do have medical intervention. If you've got an infection and you can't take care of that in a natural way, we've got antibiotics. We can take care of those things. People can live longer in that sense. But we don't want to live longer at the expense of having a quality life. And that's what we're talking about. You can live to be a quality 100 years old, 110 years old, where you could go for a jog. Okay, you could go get on a horse and go horseback riding or swimming in the ocean or run races or do whatever you want. That's the difference when we take care of ourselves in a more hunter-gatherer type of a way when it comes to things like that. Okay, now instead of using our most powerful muscles all day long, working on the farm, killing animals, hunting for our food, we sit like I am right now on our most powerful muscles of our body, and we use, if I can show here, our tiniest muscles all day long. Okay, and we get these repetitive strain injuries, and we're not using these big powerful muscles, which means we're getting heavier and heavier because we're not using these muscles and burning this energy and our fuel that we're putting in at massive amounts. Okay, so some very important ways of looking at it. I also like to draw the picture in your mind of having this scale. Okay, on one side we've got 10 out of 10 health, which is just perfect health. You can't get sick. You're as healthy as you could be. And on the other side, you've got 0 out of 10, which is basically death. Let's just argue, for argument's sake, that you're at 5 out of 10. All right? There is absolutely nothing in drugs and surgery that brings you closer to 10 out of 10 as far as your health. Now, it absolutely can save your life, and it has its place without a doubt. I don't question that whatsoever. It will save you from going to 0 out of 10 in a very incredible way. But that's where we have to take a look at what will bring us to a 10 out of 10 health. All right? Get us to the point where you virtually don't get sick and you've got all the energy that you need. And that's the type of health that we want to develop. What we want to see is that all stressors basically do the exact same thing. It doesn't matter whether you eat a bad meal, you eat a good meal, you don't exercise, you have bad posture, your spine, you're not moving properly, you're thinking negative thoughts, not enough positive thoughts, too many toxins, your arguments with your spouse, you're not getting along, problems at your job. All of these different stresses essentially do the exact same thing in the body. Okay, we're going to give a couple of pictures of what that's actually doing in the body. But think of it kind of like you're born in a pool with a little backpack on, okay? And every little stress is like taking a little stone and putting it in the backpack. Sink just a tiny little bit. And now you do that every single day, all day long, and you're constantly throwing these little pebbles and rocks. Occasionally you got a boulder, and you're sinking and you're sinking and you're sinking. Doing a couple of things. It's making it you got to tread water a little bit harder and harder and harder as you're going through life because of all these stresses. Well, what if we could start taking some of those stresses and removing them from the backpack? Life gets a little easier. You got a little more energy. You're enjoying yourself a little bit more. Just kind of having some fun floating around the pool. All right? That's kind of what we want to try to do, especially from that point of view of holistic and alternative healthcare. And we'll talk about that specifically in a little bit. Okay? So we want to talk about research on plants. Let's take a scenario where you've got a whole field full of wilting plants. So what's the first thing you're going to do for a wilting plant? Usually the first thing people think of is, let's give them some water. It makes sense. So now we need to think about research and what its purpose is. There's always a question that's asked. In this case, how do you fix wilting plants? All right. So let's go based on that question. How do you fix wilting plants? So in this scenario, we got a bunch of wilting plants. We give them some water. And now we broke them up even into proper research. We've got all of our different groups of the different types of groups that we need, as far as one's getting water, one's a control group, one's not getting water, and we got our double-blind research, peer-reviewed with a p-factor of 0.05 type of research going on. Okay, and lo and behold, we get our results from the research, and the water did not fix the wilting plant. It's like, oh, well, that stinks. We kind of thought that it would. But what was our question? Our question was, what fixes wilting plants? And in this case, the water didn't fix the wilting plants. So based on the research, it says specifically, anybody who uses water for wilting plants, you're quacks. Doesn't hold up in the research. And you think, well, wait a minute. That doesn't make sense. Everybody knows that plants need water to be healthy. It's like, well, that wasn't the question. That wasn't what we're looking for in the research. Okay? And you kind of see where I'm going here. So we move on to the next one. What's the next thing that we think that we need? Nutrients. Plants need nutrients. They bring it in from the soils. Okay? So we do another research study all over again. And we've got some with water and nutrients. We go through all the different scenarios of all the different ways that we can break that up in our control groups. And lo and behold, water and nutrients now don't fix the wilting plants. So anybody who gives nutrients and water to wilting plants, they're quacks because it doesn't hold up in the research. And the same thing happens with sunlight. Sunlight, nutrients, water doesn't help with the fact that these plants are wilting. Anybody who gives plants that are wilting any water, nutrients, and sunlight, they're quacks. And that's exactly what happens with holistic and alternative healthcare. I'm going to explain that in just a second. But we look a little further, and we see the scenario here with diesel fuel contaminating our soil. You look up a mile or two up the road, there's diesel fuel that's causing the wilting of the plants. And that's kind of where we're coming across here. And you might see a scenario where, they're always trying to disprove something that's holistic based, that's alternative type of healthcare, some type of a nutrient. And you're never going to see a study that says, oh, well, water cures cancer. You're never going to see that study. One, nobody's going to pay for it because you can't make money off of water, really, not to the level of a medication would. And you're going to have a scenario where you can't do the research. Nothing's going to, you're going to do the research if you did have the money, and you're going to find out that water doesn't cure cancer. It's like, oh, well, that stinks. Anybody who gives water to a cancer patient, they're quacks. You don't give water to cancer patients. That's ridiculous. We all know that to be healthy, we need plenty of water. So it doesn't matter if a patient comes into my office and they are as healthy as they could be, or if they've got diabetes or heart disease or cancer. I want to make sure they're drinking enough water so that they could be as healthy as possible. Not as a treatment for their disease, but we want to make sure that they're getting their body as healthy as possible. Does a couple of things. One, I keep my license because I could never legally treat them with water to cure their cancer or their diabetes. But on the flip side, I'm giving them something that's incredibly healthy. And you'd be surprised, just by increasing incredible amounts of water into somebody's diet, that all of a sudden things just start getting better. It's like, that's cool. Never using it as a treatment, but we're giving them the nutrients that their body needs. In this case, water, the body needs a lot of it. Okay, so that kind of goes along the lines of what we've been talking about here. So we want to make sure that we're asking the right questions. Does the water bring the plant closer to 10 out of 10 health? Absolutely. Does water in our bodies bring us closer to 10 out of 10 health? Absolutely. Does walking every single day bring us closer to 10 out of 10 health? Yes, absolutely. Lifting weights. Does a donut do anything to make us healthier? No, it has zero impact on making us healthier. In fact, it's probably putting a little stone in our backpack. It's making us sink a little bit. We got to work a little harder. You put on a little weight. You got to deal with, breaking that down. And we've got all those issues that come along with that. So, always, is this decision, is this making me healthier or less healthy? And it's something important to keep in mind. Okay. So now, behavior modification. This is where people try to go sometimes when it comes to diet and exercise. When somebody wants chocolate and they're addicted to chocolate, and you tell them you can't eat chocolate anymore, and say, but I love chocolate, and you might get them through a day or two, and they're like, oh man, I can smell. I know it's at the grocery store, but I can still smell the chocolate. I need some chocolate. So how long is that really going to last? You can have some willpower. Some people can't last a few minutes. Some people, you might get a few days or a few weeks or a few months, but you want the scenario of eating an incredible diet for the rest of your life, okay? And you can't necessarily, not many people could have a mental capacity, a just 100% mental strength to keep them from doing something like that. Or how about exercising? Like, yep, this is it. Tomorrow I'm waking up at 4 a.m. and I'm gonna go running. I'm gonna go for my jog. And the first morning, alarm goes off. What time is it? I didn't even know 4 o'clock in the morning even existed. And you turn off the alarm and you don't even get out of bed the first morning. Okay? We have to change our belief systems about what food is and what exercise is and what that actually means. We talked about thinking of all those horrible processed devitalized foods as literally being poison, and we need to look at it that way because it really is. even though it doesn't kill you quickly, like we said, it literally is taking us from where you are, let's say 5 out of 10 in health, and bringing you to 4.9 and 4.8 and 4.7 and bringing you in that direction. Okay. One thing that sometimes will help is to just, people don't really look at their bodies. Go stand naked in front of a mirror with your Twinkie and start jumping up and down. All right. That'll kind of maybe start changing how you feel about that food, because it's that same Twinkie as you're jumping up and down and you're watching those, rolls jumping up and down on your body that is causing all that problem. We don't make that association necessarily that piece of bread that you're eating, it's made out of dough. Dough makes rolls, all right? And you got rolls all over your body, and we need to get rid of those. Get out the bread, get off the carbohydrate and all of the different sugars and all those things that we've been talking about, okay? We've talked about this already a little bit as far as this particular analogy, that the body always does what it does for a reason. And it's easy to paint the picture with an iceberg. So you're half naked on an iceberg for whatever reason you'd be doing that. And so it's 20 below. Your body very smartly will try to keep you alive as long as possible. Alive long enough to hopefully get some blood to your brain, so they said, well, let me get off this ice cube and go get some warmth and warm back up again. So what does the body do? It starts taking blood from your fingers and your toes and bring it back to your vital organs to keep you alive, your heart and pumping blood and all of your organs. And up your arms, and it's just working its way and gets all of your blood, and it doesn't care if it loses a few fingers. All right? Frostbite, your fingers are going to fall off, your toes are going to fall off, but your body's doing the one thing that it needs to do, is keep you alive right now. And that's always the body's intent, is to keep you alive. That's what we talked about with the cholesterol. It's putting plaquing there in the arteries to keep you alive. Okay, so we need to understand that. So with the iceberg, it's again keeping you alive as long as possible to get off the iceberg or to start eating better foods. All right. So when we talked earlier about the stress, all those different types of stresses that our body needs to deal with on a regular basis, think about it. I'm going to exaggerate it so you really get the point across of why the body does what it does. Think like you're running from a lion or a tiger, okay? The same exact stress happens in your body running from a lion or a tiger as it does with all those other stresses. Argument with your boss or your spouse, or money issues, or school, exams are coming up, all those different things. They create the same stresses, okay? So let's think about running from a tiger. You're running from a tiger. Where do you want your blood sugar? Okay? You want blood sugar high, because you better be running your tail off, all right? Now, the problem is running from a tiger a couple thousand years ago, one way or another, it's over quickly, all right? You either got away or you didn't. But now you have a scenario where you're dealing with your boss and your spouse and your food that you're eating that's lousy and all these different stresses all day, every single day, okay? So the stress we were under from a tiger, there was a purpose for it, but it didn't last very long. So think about this for a second. We keep your blood sugar really high when you're running from a tiger. Makes sense, because you got to run away from the tiger. You get really high sugar, and your insulin's not going to work as well because you need your blood sugar to be up. All right, so you kind of decrease this resistance to your insulin working properly, and you kind of become long-term, every single day, all day, if that's all you do is run from a tiger, then you start developing a pre-diabetic or a diabetic scenario, okay? What are the chances of getting hurt running from a tiger? Probably pretty good, and your body knows that. So it starts making all these platelets and sticky things in case you get this big gash in your arm, that you're going to be able to heal it up to the best of your ability, maybe be able to survive from something like that. But every day, all day, sticky and thicker blood, it's not a scenario that we want to have all day, every day, okay? Your immune system. Think about the last time that you were sick. You're probably laying on a couch or your bed for a week or two. you don't have any energy, you're absolutely wiped out. That's your immune system kicking in. Your immune system takes incredible amounts of energy to the point where you pretty much can't do anything else. All right. So when you're running from a tiger, how much energy do you really want going to your immune system? Not much. You want it all going to your muscles and being able to run. But every single day, all day, dealing with stress instead of being able to give some energy to your immune system means you're a little bit more capable of getting sick and being run down that much more often. Okay. Think about what happens when you're running from a tiger. Your blood sugar's up, and, well, it could be more than just one tiger. So you hear him yelling from, behind, but he could have buddies from the side. So you're thinking and you're all over the place and you're really hyper aware of everything, okay, when you're under a lot of stress. Think about the child who just had some kind of, sugar-crusted sugar cereal on top of orange juice, on top of some kind of a, something else that's sugar on their way to school. And they go to school and they're all sugared and buzzed up, and, they got a test coming up, and, they listen to their parents. They've been arguing and all this different stress going on in this kid's life. And he's got all this stress and all this sugar in his body, and he's all over the place, and he can't sit still and can't think straight. This is the first kid in the world that's going to be diagnosed with some kind of ADD or ADHD. But he's doing exactly what the environment is telling him to do. He's under stress from the environment, from the food that he's eating, and he's doing the same thing he would be doing running from a tiger. He's just hyper alert and trying to deal with everything he could possibly be dealing with. All right? You put him, you decrease all that sugar in a calmer environment, and he didn't listen to, his parents yelling and screaming or whatever the scenario, whatever stresses he's dealing with, and maybe he doesn't have the same level of ADD and ADHD and can save him from any number of different medications. Another lecture that I give specifically on ADD and ADHD, I like to specifically bring up the point that there's a Dr. Bruning who is responsible for a large majority of the research on Ritalin, and he actually pled guilty in a U.S. federal court for falsifying his data. Now, Ritalin is in the same family of drug as cocaine, and its whole purpose ultimately, when you break it down, is kind of to fry the nervous system to the point where you fried it to the point where the kid just is a zombie, and now he can sit there all day long and not have any personality, not, respond and react to everything that's going on in a way that, like we had said before, the body does what it does for a reason. Why would this little kid be jumping all over the place? Maybe he needs a little extra recess and burn some energy instead of just sitting there for 10 hours a day in school and another 10 hours a day in front of a video game system. But, it all comes into play as being really important and kind of taking that into account, dealing with those types of kids. Even adults will come into the office. My ADD is just kicking in again. I can't focus on anything. Well, your environment and your food won't let you. And, this even goes into play when we're talking about, earlier we've talked with the Pottenger's cats, and you've got developing fetus in human beings. And, they not only respond to the amount of nutrition coming in, it's incredibly important to make sure that the baby is getting all the nutrients that it needs to develop. Incredible amounts of good fats, because that's what's developing our nervous system, and we can think clearly. But the baby the fetus can still hear and responds to the environment. And if mom and dad are just yelling the whole time, there's a couple of different things that take place. You take most mammals, they have a very defined, very developed hindbrain. Okay? Hindbrain means essentially fight or flight. It means reaction. Right now, you don't even have to think about it. That's what every animal on the planet basically has, is a hindbrain that's very developed, and it's very instinctual. That's why the lion doesn't think about, oh, I wonder if I should, walk down by that area and hunt and do that. It's like, oh, no, there's food and boom, it's gone. It doesn't have to think about it. It's automatic. Okay? That's what the hindbrain does. You don't think about being thirsty or hungry. You are, and you react and respond to it. And then we've developed as humans where we've got our frontal cortex. Okay? So our frontal cortex allows us to think more clearly and rationally. Oh, well, that jerk cut me off driving in a car. Well, I could cut him off again, but I don't need to cause a car accident, so let me think this through, and I won't cut somebody else off and cause even a worse problem. Okay? You get the idea. But what will happen sometimes is you get a scenario where the baby is growing inside mom, and there's all this yelling and all this noise and stress and things going on. The baby's hindbrain is actually overdeveloping, even from that young, at the expense of the cortex. All that blood's going back into the hindbrain. And now you've even got a kid where a developed hindbrain, and that's where the scenario, something happens and you go off and you're swearing and you're saying and doing all these things, and later on you're like, wow, that wasn't even me. I'm sorry I even said that. I don't know what I was thinking. It's like, the problem is you weren't thinking, and you actually physically and physiologically couldn't at that point. All the blood going to your hindbrain, the stress of the situation, the sugar, the way that things have been developing, that it creates a lot of issues. So, we need to really make sure, especially from that dietary standpoint. And there's other lectures that I've got that go more into pregnancy and pediatrics and the developing brain and things that we need to know about. But from that nutritional standpoint, again, something that's really important for us to look at. So again, running from the tiger, we're going to use up serotonin quite a bit, which means you're not going to sleep as well. All right. So the more stress you're under, the worse that you're eating all day, every single day, and we're under the same amount of stress and we're eating up our serotonin, it almost doesn't matter how hard you try, you can't fall asleep. All right. And then you got to use any number of different medications that you try to force yourself to sleep. If you exercised properly and you ate right, you'd be able to sleep normally and you'd make the normal amount of serotonin. Okay. So we need all of this sugar to run from the tiger again. All right. So if we need all this sugar, what are we going to be craving constantly? You're going to want all the cookies and cakes and ho-hos and cupcakes and ding-dongs and pizza and cereal and all those different things that we need to keep our blood sugar up. All right. We're going to crave them. You're like, I got to have some sugar. We shouldn't have to crave those things all day, every day. If you're craving it, that means that your hormones are off and that the body is reacting the way that it's supposed to right then and there. But we need to change what's going on in our environment, the stress, eating the better foods and ultimately being able to fix the problem. Okay. It screws up some things called the sex hormone binding globulin. You won't make enough of it. So picture this. You've got sex hormone, which causes growth. You've got the binding globulin, which binds it up. So now you've got bound hormones in the body, and they're floating around, and we can pull them out when we need them and unbind them and actually use it. But what do hormones do? Think about them as growth, and the binding globulins kind of control that growth. So that you don't want constant, never-ending growth, because that's kind of what cancer is. It's never-ending growth. And when you're under stress, you're running from a tiger, or in this case, you're under stress all day, every single day, that creates a problem. You've got all of these hormones that are unbound, causing growth in an uncontrolled way. That's a big problem. All right. Running from a tiger, blood pressure goes up. So every single day, all day, people's blood pressure are higher because your body is doing what it's supposed to be doing. You're doing what it's telling it to do to keep you alive longer because it wants to get some blood to your head. And now you've got a scenario where blood pressure's up a little bit, maybe because somebody's 100 pounds overweight and there's thousands of extra capillary miles to be able to pump blood through. And now, any physics professor in the entire world is going to say the pump's got to pump harder to pump it through there. But Western medicine says, no, it's a stupid body. We want to treat the numbers. You have numberosis. and we want to lower your blood pressure, force it down, and we can do that. But now, the body thought that it was smart enough to raise it, so it did, and now we've got a medication that forces it down. You're not getting blood as easily to the brain, so you're sitting down or you're laying down, and you go to stand up, and now all of a sudden you're lightheaded and dizzy because you can't even pump blood to your head. All right, so you're again not thinking clearly, and getting nutrients and oxygen and all those different things that go down that road. It creates a big issue with even medications like that. So one thing nutritionally to keep in mind of just how drastic this can be is that you can take a cow in 6 weeks and fatten them up for slaughter, and by giving them that much refined grain, 90% of them will have liver tumors because of the amount of carbohydrate. In 6 weeks, they can induce it. 90% of them will have liver cancer in 6 weeks by feeding them that much grain. Now, yes, we're not cows, although some people eat like that. I've had my fair share of times that I've done that myself. But it parallels so well. If a healthcare provider ever says, it doesn't really matter what you eat, you could eat this or that, it doesn't really matter, that means that they're ignorant in nutrition, and that you probably in that area don't want to listen to them. All right, it's way more important than they're making it out to be. And interestingly, you feed all that grain to a cow that's not ever meant to have eaten that much grain, produces a lot of gas, methane gas, to break it down. And they've got their 3 stomachs, and I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to watch some of the documentaries on this happening, but they actually have to cut a hole in the side of the cow. They've got these portholes that literally you can see inside their stomach, everything that's in there. And they have to do this because if they didn't, their stomachs would literally explode because of the gases that are produced from breaking down all that grain. Okay. Now cows can live with a porthole if they're not vain enough to worry about it too much. They really don't have a choice, and that's okay. But what about us with the amount of carbohydrate that we're putting into our body? We talked about all the fermentation, all the breakdown of that, creating all the different gases, the methane gas. That's a big complaint that patients have. I'm always gassy and bloated. Well, we can't put a porthole in the side of it. I guess you probably could, but that's not something that you probably really want to do. So you say, oh, well, let me just take my Gas X and my acid reflux medication and whatever else that they can do to stop the gas. Well, you can stop the gas by getting rid of all the carbohydrate and all the different processed and refined foods that we're putting into the diet. That's the point. Okay. So, just as a good analogy here, we're talking about the fire department for a second, and we'll use them as the analogy of the Western medicine medical institution, and not to downplay either of them. House is on fire, you call the fire department without a doubt. But what happens when they come? They've got their axes and their hoses, and they break down the door, and they break the glass, and they spray everything down, and ruin half of what's in there. But they saved the house, and thank God. I'll call the fire department in 2 seconds if the house is on fire. Not a problem. But you don't call the fire department back when you need the house to be fixed. All right? You call the electrician and the plumber and the contractor and all the people to rebuild the house to be where it's supposed to be. Makes sense. All right? So now your body's on fire. Major infection, major car accident, major, whatever it is, and you're in the emergency room, and absolutely, the surgery and drugs and whatever, keep me alive. And they get you alive. They get you back to the point where you can go home. You're relatively rehabilitated to that point. The same idea. You don't necessarily use the emergency room and all those drugs and surgery to bring you back to 10 out of 10 health. They saved your life. They kept you from 0 out of 10. And that's the point. That's what we want. But That's when you bring in all of the things in that holistic alternative world that nurses your body truly back to 10 out of 10 health. Don't need research for most of it. There's plenty of it, actually, and I can provide tons of it. But the water and the whole food supplements that we talked about, the herbs sometimes, the adjustments and the balancing of the body, the things that you can do to balance your structure, to help drain your lymphatic system, the sewer system of your body, massage work, craniosacral work, pumping the cerebral spinal fluid properly, acupuncture, all those different things to rebuild your vitality and your health all over again. The right nutrition to keep inflammation down and to allow you to actually heal properly. All those things come into play. And that's you don't go to the emergency room to get those things. That's where you end up in doctors' offices like myself and several other alternative healthcare people out there. And they all serve their place. And it's important to be able to look into that. Okay. So let's take a look at this for a second here. As far as expenditures, all right, we've got something like $501 million a year spent on heart disease, $430 million on cancer, $337 million on digestive disorders, obesity, $320 million, diabetes, $273 million, arthritis, $118 million, osteoporosis fractures, it's only $38 million. All right, this is the cost per day. All right, this isn't per year. This is the costs per day. All right, astronomical amounts of money. All right, we need to keep that in mind. And again, this isn't let's throw another $20 trillion at the healthcare system to have more drugs and more surgeries. They have their place. We've talked about that. That's fine. But there's certainly a huge avenue of improving people's health. And, if you improved people's food intake, which we've talked about, which means much more on the organic side of fruits and vegetables and organic meats, you improve people going to the bathroom every day. You have them breathing fully, getting more oxygen in every single day. You probably more or less would, you maybe a little bit of supplementation, whole food supplementation, getting their good fish oil, getting their, certain things that they may need to supplement the unperfect diet. You would have a scenario where you would ultimately be a whole lot healthier, and you'd probably get rid of 80% of what most people's health concerns are in this country. All right. And that would absolutely work. And then the other 10 or 20%, yeah, you've still got all the drugs and surgery. You help the super, super horrible cases. But even, I've time and time again, I've had people that literally were told you won't live past the next few days or a few weeks, and have been in my office because they've had no other place to go and nursed them back to health and still alive today years later. Okay, it's very capable to do that a lot of times. All right? Not every time, and there's like I said, especially there's 10-20% that you're gonna have a real struggle, if at all, to be able to reverse some things without using drugs and surgery. It's there, it's great. I'm happy that it is. Okay, but throwing more money at things that aren't ultimately gonna fix healthcare is gonna come back to people taking care of their own health and seeing practitioners like myself to help guide them, through that way, getting, acupuncture and getting adjusted and the right nutrition and all those things that it's going to take to improve healthcare. And, we've got the presidential debate at the timing of this. It's 2012, just after the Olympics. Presidential stuff is really, kicking along here. And you'll be talking about healthcare and all their healthcare bills, what's going to work, what's not going to work, and how much money they're going to throw at it. And I'm going to tell you, every single one of them is not going to work until people start becoming more in control of their own health. They can't rely on some doctor to give them some pill that's going to automatically give them health. All right, it's just not going to happen. So I'm not suggesting Dr. Chris for president. I'm going to fix all healthcare, but it's not going to fix it with the current state until we make some major changes here. Okay, so talking a little bit, we're not going to get full into the whole athletic side of things. Mostly we're talking about the nutritional side, but we want to talk about moving well and exercise for a minute. All right, proven benefits, research is there. You can go to all the research journals, go to PubMed, go to New England Journal of Medicine, the JAMA, all of those different places. This is backed up, proven. There's no issues. You can't argue this. Okay? Moving well. And moving well means walking 30 to 45 minutes a day. That's about how much exercise we're talking here for these benefits. Prevents 91% of cases of obesity and type 2 diabetes. Prevents up to 50% of all cases of heart disease. Reduce risk of stroke by 25 to 30%. Prevent up to 50% of all stroke deaths. Reduce congestive heart failures by 63%. Reduce hospitalized readmissions for heart failure by 71%. Normalize blood pressure. Reduce risks of developing high blood pressure. Restore and maintain heart and blood vessel health. Restore and maintain normal cholesterol and triglycerides. Reduce risks of breast cancer up to 60%. Reduce pancreatic cancer in overweight people by up to 50%. Reduce lung cancer in smokers by up to 72%. Reduce melanoma cases by up to 72%. Prevent up to 50% of colon cancer. Reduce risk and improve rheumatoid arthritis and osteoarthritis. Prevent osteoporosis and related fractures. Increase strength and flexibility and balance. Decrease gallbladder removal by 20%. Decrease gallstone formation. Improve digestion and decrease indigestion. Improve bowel function and elimination. Increase immune system function. Increase macrophage activity, which is anti-tumor in nature. Decrease all causes of death by 67%. Decrease all-cause mortality by 50% in 61 to 81-year-olds. Prevent 47% of congenitive impairment. Prevent up to 62% of Alzheimer's and 52% of dementia. Better physical function in older adults, and decrease the chance of ever being in a nursing home. All right, that's just walking 30 to 45 minutes a day. What drug does that? There is no drug on the planet that even comes close to just walking 30 to 45 minutes a day. Not even close. All right? It's easy, it's free, and it's more powerful than almost anything you could possibly do. Now you add that in with the benefits of taking care of your body, your structure. You get things like, active release and applied kinesiology and good adjustive, chiropractic work and acupuncture and all those different things that I'll explain in other seminars. And you tie it in with a little bit of exercise, and you tie it in with this diet and nutrition that we're talking about, the right supplements, the whole food supplements, getting the nutrition in to make your body function. Now we're talking about a body that's just a tank that's almost impervious to injury and impervious to being sick. Not that you can't get sick or hurt, but you know what? It's almost like a triple force field, and you've really protected yourself, and it's a whole lot harder to be able to get sick under those scenarios. So now I'm going to switch views here just for a moment so you can see this just a little bit easier. Now, what this is going to show you is the sugar intake over the last several thousand years. Okay, we're at about 500 AD, and it's almost bottom line. We really didn't get much as far as carbohydrate. And then you add in the next 1,000 years after that, 1,500 years, really virtually didn't change. Over the last 100 years or so, sugar carbohydrate intake has just gone through the roof. And I could overlay the exact same chart and show you it overlay with diabetes, with cancer, with heart disease, with osteoporosis, with any type of degenerative and chronic diseases. The exact same charts will overlay this every single time. And that's a huge, huge issue, okay? And this is one of my other favorite slides to bring up for people to be able to see here. Now, this has to do with sugar and your immunity. Now, if you look at the middle column is the number of bacteria that a white blood cell can process in about a half-hour period of time. Okay, so the first level here we've got with no sugar. So, excuse me, if you've got no sugar whatsoever, you're at maximum capability of your immune system. Your white blood cells can process about 14 bacteria in a half-hour period of time. No decrease in the immune system, all right? So now we get a soft drink. We get some soda, about 6 teaspoons of sugar in an 8-ounce can of soft drink. Now we've gone down to about 10 bacteria in a half-hour period of time. We've decreased our immune system by about 25%, and this is going to last for about 6 hours. 12 tablespoons, got that frosted brownie that's so good. Now we're down to about 5.5 bacteria in a half-hour period of time. We're down 50% of our immune system for 6 hours. 18 teaspoons. Now we've got apple pie a la mode. We're down to 2 bacteria in a half-hour period of time. We're down 85%. 24 teaspoons. We got our big, huge banana split. We're down to 1 bacteria that a white blood cell can process in a half-hour period of time, down 92%, which is going to be the exact same scenario as a completely uncontrolled diabetic. We're at about 1 bacteria for a half-hour period of time, down 92%. Okay? You tell me what's happening from Halloween to Thanksgiving to Christmas to New Year's, the amount of junk food and the amount of sugar that we're getting in, and what's happening with our immune system and not getting the nutrients and the things that are going to be helping our immune systems, and why you're sick. Is it because there's a lot more bacteria? All right, I think not. It very clearly is not the case that there's more bacteria. It's very clearly the fact that our defenses are significantly down, based on what we're eating and the nutrients that we're not getting in. Okay. Now, I don't want to sound like the worst person in the world that, sometimes patients think like life as I know it is completely over. I've had patients, they're like, Doc, I'll do whatever it takes. I want to get healthy. I want to fix this. Like, you have no idea. Your life is over if you're going to do everything I tell you to do. But, it's not like that necessarily. Obviously, the worst things are, the more room for improvement that we have to make. But, I don't want to pretend that I always ate the best diet in the world either. I've had my health issues as a result of it. One piece of pizza turns into a whole entire pizza pie. I mentioned that to start off. In basketball, when we're coming home from a long away game, every one of us got our own pizza to go with it. I was one of those, growing up, I'm a teenager, you get a box of cereal and a whole gallon of milk. And when you ran out of, you ate the last bit of cereal, you add in more cereal. When you get your last bit of milk and there's still cereal left, you add in more milk, and you end up going to whichever one's gone first. You pretty much, there was always a pan every single day of brownies or cakes or cookie or something that we would go through. I've been there. I've done that. I know what it's like to be completely addicted to all of those types of foods. What I can tell you is that it's not hard to stop those addictions and to move past that and become much, much healthier. But you have to know what you need to do to be able to get there. And it is a whole lot easier than it sounds. And certainly I'll be able to help you do that. There's a lot of opportunities between things that we can, on an individual basis, consultations that we can have, nutritional type of appointments that we can have, and certainly some things on the supplement side that can virtually get rid of all of those cravings. Just to the point, literally, think about the food that you crave the most, whether it's some kind of chips or chocolate cake or whatever, and really more or less never caring about, having to have it. Now, you can have some, certainly, and enjoy it, and you'll enjoy it, absolutely. But never having that feeling again of, oh, man, I got to have it. It's a whole lot easier. You can live that way for the rest of your life, and that's what we're talking about, being able to live that lifestyle and not a few days or a few weeks or a month or two of a drastic, radical, force yourself to do it type of diet. This is lifestyle changes of eating really incredibly healthy, and probably like supplementing, it's in its name, supplement your diet with some things that your body is needing that you're not getting into your diet. Maybe some things like some fish oil if you're not eating enough fish, or flaxseed oil or things like that. But we can talk about those on a more specific one-on-one basis. Okay. Now, if you're not eating the right way, you're not supplementing your diet properly, and we've discussed why that's necessary. These are the top reasons why people go to see doctors. And I've got an entire seminar that's about 2 hours long that goes through every single one of these, why they are caused, in depth, and how we can reverse these processes. And that's all available on the website as well. It's down here on the bottom. It's been here the whole time, the wellnesscny.com. But everything here, every doctor in the world knows that it's reversible and preventable. Cholesterol issues, GERD, depression, pain, diabetes, allergies, osteoarthritis, osteoporosis, sleep disorders, and asthma. Those are the top reasons people go to see doctors of any kind. Okay, and every single one of these things, and I do this every day with patients in the office. We improve their health and change their diet, and these things just go away. They're healthier than they've been their entire life, and when it happens, it's not. We hope, or we hope we get lucky and these things go away. Hopefully, you've seen that by adding the right nutrition and doing the right things, that the body just becomes so healthy that these things just go away on their own. All right, and that's really ultimately where we want to be able to go with it. And I'm not suggesting by any stretch of the imagination that you just automatically stop taking your medications if you're on any, and that type of a thing. You'll always want to work with your doctor on that, because they're the ones that prescribed it for you. They're the ones that can work on helping you get off of that. But what we want to do is remove the need. If you've lost 100 pounds, your blood sugar is completely normal, and you don't need the blood sugar medication or the cholesterol medication anymore, says yourself, says your medical doctor, says all of the work that we've done together, then you and your doctor can make that decision, together. So that, if you don't need it, then, any doctor in the world is not going to keep you on some medication, even though you don't need it. That doesn't make sense. That would be not being a good doctor as well. Certainly, you get you to the point where you're so healthy that you just don't need a lot of those things. That would be the ultimate goal. Okay. I have another lecture on the website that I strongly recommend, that we talk a lot about first doing no harm. We want to make sure that we attack health problems. Even, you have a blood sugar that comes back, and you're like, oh, that's kind of looking like a pre-diabetic or a diabetic situation. Why is it that our healthcare system says, oh, well, here's 14 drugs, and we're going to take care of your diabetes? It's like, well, why jump to the most invasive things that there are on the planet to do? They're always available. Let's try exercising, burning off a little bit extra sugar, putting on some muscle so you're burning extra sugar even when you're sleeping, changing your diet so that you're not eating 300, 400 grams of carbohydrate just before breakfast. Okay. And if we can control your blood sugar that way, then it's controlled and you don't need anything. And then if you can't control it, those things are always there to help you afterwards. Okay. If you can do it without drugs and surgery, then you can do it without all the different side effects and dangers as well. And that's always the first hope, to first do no harm. If you have to go more invasive, then you go in more invasive, and you there's risks associated. You discuss the risks, and sometimes the risks just you're willing to take on those risks because not doing anything, your death is a whole lot easier to fix at that point. Okay. You're losing a heart sound, or you're having these murmurs. Once you've lost one heart sound, when you're using an acoustic cardiograph, for example, it's really hard to get somebody back after they've lost both of their heart sounds. Okay. So it kind of gives you an idea of the type of approach that we want to take in that alternative world. We just want to have that pure health, energy, and vitality. Okay. So what you should know now, from this point forward, there's going to be plenty more lectures on a regular basis that'll be up on the website that I'm doing this way. I lecture all around the world to doctors of all different types, chiropractors, medical doctors, osteopaths. I even have, nutritionists and nurses and all sorts of different people trying to learn, a lot of the things that I teach in these seminars. So, please take advantage of those. Those are largely free, and the more education you have, the better you can take care of your own health, the better everything is going to be, and the more money that you can save. We also, you can come into the office and we can have a one-on-one, nutrition consultation, whether it's in the office or even on the phone if people are watching this elsewhere. A pretty thorough nutrition evaluation. I couldn't possibly, get into what all of that entails, but imagine, spending, an hour and a half to 2 hours doing specific testing with you that will show you all sorts of different nutritional deficiencies and functional issues that the body has because of nutritional issues. So that really can be a big, huge benefit for you and be very specific, custom tailored to what you and your needs are. Okay. So again, go to the wellnesscny.com. There's tons of videos. You go to the member section. All you have to do is put in your name and your email, and you'll have access to all of that. It doesn't cost anything. And certainly feel free to call the office. It's 315-451-1152. You can schedule the appointment, and we can easily move you onto a road of much better health. And again, thank you for listening. I know there's a lot of information. It's not the shortest seminar to be able to sit and listen to the whole thing. But if I can help in any way whatsoever with your health, if you have any thoughts or questions about what I've discussed here or your own personal needs, I'm here. It's my life's passion to help people with these types of things. So please feel free to call anytime. I've got my email on here that comes directly to me. I've got the phone number to the office, so please take advantage of that. It doesn't cost anything, maybe a few pennies to make a phone call. Ask some questions, try to get some answers. If nothing else, just get as many opinions as you can possibly get, instead of just going necessarily the one very invasive, filled with a lot of side effects type of answers. There's so many times that patients have gone through the more invasive, more dangerous, now dealing with side effect approach and come into my office and, I wish I knew about this ahead of time. That I might have been able to do some things, or even people that have had the drugs and surgery and it didn't even fix what it was supposed to, and they come in the office and we make some changes to things and they get significantly better, and like, man, I really wish that I had looked at this first. And that's just my biggest urge to everybody that I could ever teach, is that let's try to exhaust least invasive, first do no harm in a first case scenario, because a lot of those things are usually available later down the road to be more invasive. So if you take nothing else from this lecture, please take that. Thank you again so much for listening, and hopefully I'll look forward to hearing from you in the office and speaking with you soon. Thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.